of motivation. But before we do that, I actually want to talk about some contributors that helped you in some of your actions or pursuits, and that helped you become successful in your pursuits. And when I say successful, I don't necessarily mean you got a certificate or somebody else's validation, though they are nice to get, especially when you get them from the right people or when they're the right types of certifications. But when I say successful, I mean some actions or pursuits that were meaningful to you as you completed them. And their completion, their outcome was what you had expected, or maybe even more than what you had expected. So I'd like to talk about some of the biggest, the most common contributors to these positive outcomes. I think a pretty frequent positive contributor to success, to happiness, is proper training, right? Taking a simple example of maybe me trying to make an interesting recipe for my friends, right? So I do need to know how to make that recipe, right? And I do need to find, maybe an online YouTube guide, or maybe somebody actually has to, either virtually or in person, teach me how to do it. And without that, I'm not necessarily equipped to tackle that task at hand, right? It's a pretty simple contributor, but it's also pretty important, right? The right training. I think our level of effort is also a pretty major contributor towards our activities, towards our pursuits, and especially in determining the outcome of these pursuits, right? Because if let's say, talking back about the recipe, the special recipe, you knew how to make it, you had all the ingredients, and in a hypothetical world where there's either no COVID or we already have a vaccine to it, right? So you can actually meet your friends and invite them over for dinner. So now you're about to make that dish, but for some reason something occurred and now you're distracted, so you don't necessarily follow all the steps of in putting that dish together. You skip out a few things, either knowingly or unknowingly, and now the outcome isn't as delicious as it could have or should have been, right? Again, pretty obvious, and please pardon me if you think these are pretty obvious pointers, but I'm trying to build up towards how some of these can be driven by what motivates you and how it does, right? Lastly, I think the situations, especially either realistic or unrealistic situations, have a definite impact on your performance, right? So again, going back to this example of you wanting to make a special dish for your friends, right? So you had planned a dinner maybe in advance, a month in advance, making sure everything's in place. But then suddenly the world went into quarantine, right? This is not in your control. And it's not a realistic situation. It's temporary, right? And because it's out of your control, there's not much you can do about it. But it definitely does end up affecting your outcome, right? But yes, were the situation realistic? Were it just another day? Your dinner party could have gone, and I'm sure would have gone successfully, right? So these, I think, are some general, extremely high level contributors to your actions and their outcomes. And I'm trying to keep us on a pretty general level of discussion. I'm not trying to talk about special circumstances or unique circumstances, which I'm sure occur pretty frequently to us. I'm going to leave them out for a discussion that follows. But for now, I just want to talk about the ordinary, the general, right? The most frequent. So now that we spoke about the contributors, I'd like us to think about some of the detractors to successful quality work, right? I think a pretty frequent common detractor is unavailability of resources, right? Going back to this example of, me wanting to make the special dish for my friend. Let's say I just couldn't find that one special ingredient that I absolutely need to make this dish, right? It's nowhere to be found in any of the stores around me. checked online, either none of the stores online, either they don't have it or they do, and the delivery date time is like something pretty ridiculous. So that ingredient is not going to make it to you in time. There's not much you can do about it, right? So this completely affects your ability to tackle that task at hand. Apart from lack of availability of resources, unavailability of proper help or proper required training also adversely affects the quality of your outcome, right? So if, let's say, your friend was going to talk you through this recipe, help guide you either virtually or in person making this recipe, or maybe it was a family member, maybe it was your mom who was going to talk you through this whole recipe, and maybe something came up for them and they're not able to be with you at that point, right? You have all the ingredients, you're not going to be able to make it, and this is a special recipe, so you can't really even find it on, say, YouTube or Google, right? So because of this lack of understanding of this task, you're unable to complete it meaningfully. Lastly, I think procrastination is a pretty frequent detractor to successful and quality work. And when I say procrastination, it's a bit of a difficulty bringing this up, because from my own personal experience, speaking for myself, I know a lot of events in my life actually are just me procrastinating pretty subtly and in a pretty refined way, when I give myself certain elegant excuses, but in a sense, in all honesty, I'm just really procrastinating, right? And it can be that I'm procrastinating maybe for a few minutes, right? In which case it doesn't really affect my outcome too much. I do get the job done, but maybe I spend some time on doing something else. Maybe I listen to some music, maybe I, go take a quick walk before I come back and I get it done with, right? Or in other cases, I'm able to successfully procrastinate for not a few minutes, but maybe a few hours or days, or maybe even a few years. And that outcome might be beyond repair, right? So procrastination is, I think, pretty dangerous task-wise, and it lurks between all these excuses and complex scenarios. So it's hard to put a finger on it, but it really is procrastination. So the reason why I actually brought up these detractors and contributors to success, especially after we just had a beautiful meditation, is because I wanted to approach these with, a clearer mental palette in an attempt to really qualify these into those that we can control and those that we cannot control. Because let's face it, we're all finite beings and we might feel like we can control everything, but in reality, few things could be out of our control. And on the contrary, at other times, we might feel like nothing's in our control, but in reality, some things are always in our control. So with this discussion, I actually want to, classify things into those that we probably can control versus those that we probably or mostly cannot control, right? So unavailability of resources is not entirely always in our control, right? Makes sense. Again, that special ingredient, if it's nowhere to be found, you can't always, if you're living in New York City, you don't have a backyard, so you can't really grow it. So there's not much you can do about it. Lack of required training, again, not entirely in your control. Special recipe, it's not available online. Friends busy, mom's busy, not too much you can do about it. Procrastination is, I think, a tricky one. I think it's definitely in my control sometimes, while others, I question if it really is. But for sake of this argument or this discussion, let us for now consider it to be completely in our control. Let's talk about the contributors now. Proper training, partially in our control. Again, friend promised to help us, but now they're out. Not much we can do. Level of effort, though, I think is pretty much in our control, right? If I want to do something, it's up to me to do it well, to prepare for it well, to get all necessary help, ingredients, resources, and then finally apply myself to it, right? Realistic situations, as we could guess, are mostly out of our control, right? Now, all of us, I'm sure, would love to go back, to go out, meet with friends, family, but, we can't really do it because of the pandemic. So it's out of our control, so we have to make the most of what we can, right? So how does really motivation come into factor amongst these attributes or these detractors and contributors to success? So I think, okay, little green boxes around these attributes that you can control. Moving over to motivation. I think motivation helps us determine how we do something based on the reason or the intention of why we're doing it. So I think the how and the why sort of go together. I think they're just as important. And in my experience, I've, at times only thought about the how without giving enough thought to the why. And eventually, despite working elaborately on the how, making sure I checked all the boxes, the outcome was just not as meaningful to me. And in retrospect, it was because I just didn't think about the why as much, right? And a quick example could be, maybe I decide to get a degree, or maybe I decide to get a certain type of a job, hoping it's going to get me to become a specific kind of person that I'm hoping to be, right? So I work on the how. I actually achieved these goals, these bucket list goals, but I don't really feel like it got me where it could have. And at least speaking for myself, oftentimes that might have been because I didn't really think about the why enough, right? And if I just did think about the why enough, I might have discovered, hey, I'm actually doing this not for the right why. So maybe I should actually pursue a different goal. Or maybe because I thought about the why enough, that gave me a unique perspective into how I should do it, right? On the other hand, just thinking about the why am I doing this, and elaborately painting this dream and this reality of why I'm doing it without focusing too much on the how is just as dangerous, right? Because if we just keep philosophizing about why we're doing something, but we don't actually do it, or if we do it but don't elaborately do it, then we can guess the outcome is not going to be what we expect and definitely won't be as meaningful, right? So in all of this, I think the importance of motivation is it helps us derive inspiration to apply ourselves to these attributes we can control based on the reason why we're doing it. That's where we get the inspiration from, right? It affects the quality and quantity of our output, and these together then drive. I'm sorry, motivation affects the quality and quantity of our input, which then drives the output. There's a few more things about motivation that I read in Charles Duhigg's book and that I also would like to share with you guys. But I'm going to keep it for the next session. For now, I'd like to hear from you what motivates you. You can share certain experiences, maybe from your day-to-day life, maybe things that you do very occasionally, but that mean something to you, or things that you thought could mean something to you, but maybe they ended up not meaning as much to you, right? And I'm actually going to start by sharing an example for myself. What is my motivation to conduct these online meditation self-development courses, sessions, right? My motivation is meditation, self-development helps me become by better, I mean a happier person, right? And I'd like my friends to be happy. And my friends have actively asked me to share this. And I just don't want to restrict this happiness just to my friends, right? I want to open it up to anybody who'd like to. So that's really what motivates me, is just becoming a better person and sharing that, and also learning from everybody else who's here as to what helped them become better, because that's if it helped them, it very probably would help me, right? So with that said, I'm gonna stop sharing and I'd like to open us for a discussion. I'd like to hear some of your examples. So I'm gonna stop sharing. Any examples of what you hoped could be meaningful to you, and maybe you realized it was more meaningful to you than you had actually imagined? I think, Ruben, you unmuted yourself. You want to share something?
How did you catch me that quickly? I was still thinking, but yes. So yes, yes, I would like to share. Well, as as easy as it is, as a story, I would say, and you know that story pretty well. It's well, definitely the motivation that I had in my case. One of the biggest things of my that I've done definitely is like me moving from my country to a different country, which is probably like maybe we're gonna have similar, you know, motivation, similar contributors and detractors on this, considering that you've done the same shift. In my case, the motivation that led me, I can give the practical example of studying for the GMAT while I was still in Italy, because I had to take it before, getting the application done for the college. The motivation that led me, and it's interesting because I had numerous detractors in that situation, which were not necessarily, structural detractors, but more like maybe social detractors in terms of, family and maybe society and the type of, environment I was in. But what really led me towards, you know, uh, I would say hustle more and more, make it happen, like have like a decent score at GMAT, and being able to keep it up and like come to the United States was definitely uh, curiosity, love for the diversity, love for the knowledge, I would say, in a certain way. So that was definitely like my biggest contributor for my goal to achieve my goal. Yes.
Hmm. That's wonderful. Yeah, thank you for sharing that, and I can definitely relate with that.
Hmm.
So, question: were you aware of this significant contributor back then, or were you aware, or did you get that awareness in retrospect? If you
Hmm.
don't mind.
No, I have no problem. No, definitely that was like a pre-existing, motivator for me. Like I had the chance to come before, obviously, so I could already kind of foresee what I was expecting here, and I was curious and eager to deepen my knowledge of new cultures, new environments, new friends, new people. So it was like an existing condition back then before I came. Yeah. If I have to think about possible motivators that I found out after I moved to the United States, as corny as this seems, is like finding very long lasting friendships, which could be in this case you, or other relationships that maybe you don't think, because you don't know how it's going to be the experience or how long is that going to last, so you don't really
Mm.
think about that necessarily. But in the end, it's things that, like, if I would know before, that I would have met friends that I would have had for a lifetime, hopefully, but like for a long time, it would have
Yeah.
been definitely like another great contributor for the experience.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely. Thank you for sharing
Hmm.
that, and thank you for considering me such a good friend. The same for me too.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah. If anybody else would like to share, Shanat, I see you smiling. If you have, am I allowed to call on
Well,
people?
I think motivation is. I like what you said, that it's important to identify the why you're doing something, right? In order to help you proceed on this task, to remind you why it's important. I think that is definitely a strong motivator, right? To know, uh, especially when you're in a project and it's getting very difficult, you don't know how to finish it, you don't know if you want to finish it. if you stop and you ask yourself, why am I even doing this in the first place? And then you remember the real reason, then yeah, you need to continue, right? If that reason is important. So I think that that's important. Sometimes we have a challenge when it comes to motivation, that maybe we don't like the people we're working with, or the people that we've been working with have disappointed us in some way. Do you have any advice for that? Like, if part of what has put you in a rut is that you're working in a group setting and you're not quite vibing well with the people, what do you say to that?
Well, I'm gonna
How
start
can you
off by
stay motivated in that
yeah.
circumstance?
Thank you for putting me on the spot. In my opinion, again, thinking back in similar experiences that I've been, right? An experience would be something I can remember from about a year and a half ago, right? I had this job and it was pretty difficult, and I was living about 2.5 hours away from where I worked. So every day I had to drive to work and back, and the working hours were difficult. People were wonderful, but the job was difficult. And again, like all these external circumstances were like really difficult. And after driving like 4+ hours every day, if I went home late, I used to not get parking. So I'd like park like in spots that were not actually parking spots, and wake up earlier the next day so I don't get a ticket. And working hours were crazy too. So I asked myself the same. I'm like, bro, like, why are you doing this? Like, you can always just go back home to your parents. They'll take care of you. You can find a new job, or you can just take a break for now. But then and at that point, I hadn't actually thought enough of the why, right? I was just in the how, in the rut. So thankfully, it wasn't the end of the road for me, right? I still, my work was still valued. I was still able to, make it to work. But then after asking myself, suddenly realizing I hadn't asked myself the why enough, I decided to ask myself that why. And I didn't get the answer right away. But eventually I realized, hey, I am in a job. I am in this job, or it could be any job, but I am in a job right now because, I want to keep working and I want to keep learning these, as you might or might not know, some of you, I work in technology, right? So I want to keep learning more about technology. I want to keep working amongst these awesome people. And it's not just for paycheck or for the learning. It's also so that my wife, who was still overseas and her visa was still getting processed, she can also come here and join me, right? So every day as I send that email, as I wake up and save myself from the parking ticket, all of those things, quantum by quantum, are actually contributing towards my wife being here. So one more email, and I'm one more email closer to that goal. And that is why I'm doing it. So it's much more than just the paycheck for me. And when I realized that, I didn't mind the lack of sleep, or the crazy work hours, or all of these other circumstances. And soon enough, things like started to fall in place. So that's my long-winded answer for that. Not sure if it really helped, but that's...
Yeah, obviously she was a big motivator. It's a big prize to gain, right? That you were working toward your wife coming to join you. So, yeah.
Anybody else want to share?
Hi, Apu. It's
Anjali,
Anjali.
thank you for doing it.
Thanks. I'm happy to be here. Well, I wanted to share, this is really special to me because I'm actually going to start grad school in January for industrial organizational psychology, which has a lot to do with motivating people in the workplace, right? So for me, my motivation in life is putting a smile on people's face and making them feel comfortable and accepted. And I didn't figure that out until I was a lot older, because I always had problems of feeling like I'm always people pleasing, right? Like I always wanted this person to be happy, but never really put into perspective my own happiness. And I realized that even if I don't get the thank you that I think I wanted, still introspectively, I was gaining some sort of happiness because seeing that person, making them more comfortable and everything is my motivation. But one of the detractors for me in that is sometimes I get lost in doing things for others and not doing enough for myself. So yeah, that's a little bit about me.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think, yeah, thinking about the why and the how definitely lets us recontextualize everything, right? When I was younger, I used to feel like some bits that don't necessarily fit in that jigsaw puzzle right away, they might not be necessary for the puzzle. But as I, grew older or like got more experienced, I realized that it's not that they're not necessary, they just need to be recontextualized. Like they fit perfectly someplace else. So like you said, right, like everybody else's happiness is pretty important, but it fits someplace else along with your own happiness, right? And it shouldn't eclipse your own happiness. Like they need to go hand in hand. And I guess the right people to please are the ones that don't come in your way of your own happiness, maybe. So yeah, I definitely feel like thinking about the why and the how lets us recontextualize things.
Yeah, I'm definitely still learning in life about why I am the way I am. Why do I derive that happiness from helping others and finding that balance of helping people, but not forgetting about myself.
Definitely. Anything else anybody would like to share? Thank you for that, guys. That was wonderful. If not, I can move on to the most boring part of the deck, which is announcements. So again, if you haven't registered, if you're on YouTube, Facebook Live, you can register on the meetup link that I shared on Facebook, but I couldn't share on YouTube. But you guys can always just find us on meetup.com. We're Vistara Circle, New York. And this is the Sunday evenings online meditations. We're called Sunday Evening Online Meditation and Self-Development. We'll be back next week, 8 p.m. Eastern Time, continuing this discussion on motivation, along with spiritual singing, guided and silent meditations. Okay, I just saw Mr. Suzuki's message. Good morning from Japan. It's Monday morning here. I have to go, okay? Nice talking to you too, mister. Thank you for joining us. Hell, I'll see you in about 12 hours again on Zoom. Same place.
Yeah. Thank you for that reminder.
Right? It's not a long weekend yet.
I had been quite relaxed.
If you do, I'm glad. I'm glad you guys could join.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, so I'll let you carry on with your Sunday nights. I'll talk to you guys soon, all of you. Thanks for joining us. Namaskar, good night.
Thank you. Namaskar. Good night.
Thank you, Apu. Thank you very much.
Apu. Thank you.
Mm.